Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. This evening I'm going to be discussing and ranking and reviewing the early years of Iced Earth. I was going to call this the Century Media years, however they're now back with Century Media. But the specific era here is their first 6 studio albums, basically covering their first release in 1990 and going through their 6th release in 2001. So it was their first run on Century Media. To me, these are the classic years. This is the era that I got into, and the era that that I know the best. And I think most people would say this is the time of the band, specifically the '90s, where they just were making their best music and their classic material. So we'll just kind of get right into it. I'm going to rank these 6 albums. All 6 of these are excellent. Very good to classic. I would say that 2 of these are classic, and the other ones are damn fine albums. So we'll just get right to it here. Coming in at number 6, their 6th album from 2001. I've got Horror Show. So this is the final one that they did on Century Media for a time. And this is cool in that all of the songs are based around horror movie characters. So the first track is called Wolf, then you've got Damien, Jack, might be my favorite one on here. The Ghost of Freedom is one they did that doesn't really pertain to a character. Imhotep, which is the mummy. Jekyll and Hyde, Dragon's Child, which I found out was the creature from the Black Lagoon. Frankenstein, Dracula is a good one, the Phantom Opera Ghost. And then as a bonus track off here, I've got the instrumental Transylvania, an Iron Maiden cover. By the way, it's the Witching Hour. What else do they have on? You get all your characters here. Wolf. You got Jack, or Jack the Ripper. You got all these Jekyll and Hyde, Imhotep, or the Mummy. There's the band at that point in front of the Devil's Tower. By the way, this lineup, that's Richard Christie. He played on the Final Death album, and I forget the name of the project off the top of my head that Control Denied, the other Chuck Schuldiner project in '99. Well, he's the drummer on this album for Iced Earth there. There's the main guy, John Schaefer. He runs the show. There's Matt Barlow, probably their best singer, or at least he was the singer that fit the band the best and was on all the classic albums. Let's just put it that way. I'm not sure who that guy is right there. Larry Tarnowski, maybe? This is the only reason I knew that Dragon's Child was about the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's just based on that picture right there. So, Frankenstein, Dracula, Phantom Opera Ghost, so on and so forth. So there you go. Oh, and Steve DiGiorgio plays session bass on this. And that's another thing. Iced Earth, I was really into the whole death metal thing, but these guys were on Century Media. They were out at the same time as all that classic death metal, and they would record at Morrisound Studios every time with, I don't remember if it was Jim Morris or Tom Morris or both, but they were totally involved in that Tampa scene. So, Iced Earth, it's hard to, a lot of people call them like power metal. I don't like power metal, but I like Iced Earth. I guess I can hear a little bit in the overly dramatic vocal approach, but there's some sort of like classic metal, speed metal, thrash metal, epic, all those types of things. And this is, of the ones I'm going to rank, this is probably the heaviest one. They got pretty heavy by this point, and just based on the fact that the themes are all horror movie themes, they don't pull any punches on this one. It's pretty aggressive all the way through. So this is probably certainly sonically their heaviest one I'm going to review, and I think even content-wise, this one's pretty aggressive. So there you go, coming in at number 6 from 2001, their 6th album, Horror Show. Okay, coming in at number 5, tough to rank this one, because I think the songs are really strong, but the vocals are not so strong. So at number 5, I have their debut from 1990, self-titled Iced Earth. I'll get to something that they released that I'm not ranking here, but that I'll talk about, where they redid these songs. And again, I think this could be a classic album, but just the vocals on here are really bad. Gene Adam was their singer at this point. And so the song Iced Earth is great. The song Written on the Walls, which is later re-recorded with different lyrics, called Cast in Stone. It's like the songs, when you hear the opening riffs, you're just like, man, that's a classic song. And all these have that thing to them where you hear the opening riff to all these songs and you're like, oh yeah, that song. Colors is cool, Curse the Sky, Life and Death, Solitude's a short one, Funeral. So it's like a short acoustic instrumental into a big, basically an instrumental, Funeral. It's got some spoken word in the beginning, or in the middle, kind of like To Live Is To Die by Metallica. And ironically, this comes out, 2 years after that album and that song was released. When the Night Falls. So this is a really good collection of songs, many of which were on their infamous Enter the Realm demo from '88, and a lot of those reappeared on here. In fact, I think everything that was on there, almost everything that was on there, reappeared on here. Again, recorded at Morrisound 1990. Their demos were recorded in '88 at Morrisound, and I think they had stuff that goes back to like '86 at Morrisound. So my earliest recollections of people recording at Morrisound weren't until like Death Did Leprosy. A few thrash bands were there maybe in '87, but I know Sabotage was there all the way back in '83, and I think Iced Earth was there in as early as '86. But there you go. Number 5, I've got their self-titled album debut from '90. This was the cover I remember when I was a kid. When I was a kid, it was this angel falling. And then I guess they re-released it. And this was Axel Herman did the artwork here. Then they re-released it, and I think they had Travis Smith do the next artwork. And now they're onto their 3rd album cover for this album. So who knows? They got 3 different album covers for this. Again, this was the classic one I recall. But, so there you go. Coming in at number 5, their debut, self-titled, the only one with Gene Adam on vocals. He really brings this down probably a notch or 2 as far as the ranking. I forget the name of the drummer, but they had a different drummer just for this album. They never have had 2 albums, even to this day, they've never had 2 albums in a row with the same exact lineup. But there you go. Number 5, their self-titled for 1990. Okay, coming in at number 4, this is a really good album. I remember being slightly disappointed when it came out, but looking back on it, I don't know why I would have been disappointed in this one, because it's a heck of an album. Their 4th album from '96, I've got Dark Saga. What a cool album cover, too. The artist that did Spawn, he did this album cover, and I believe he did one other, but I just remember the albums before this, everything was, to me, was a classic. The first 3 albums were classic. In spite of vocal issues on the first one, I thought the first 3 albums were classics. And this one, for some reason, in my opinion, didn't live up to it. It wasn't quite as epic, and for some reason I thought it wasn't as heavy, but listening to it now, it is heavy. It certainly has songs that are heavy. So it starts off with Dark Saga, which is just kind of a mid-paced, 4-minute. A lot of these songs are a little bit shorter. But Dark Saga is catchy. I Died For You is a little mellower, but Violate is a heavy song. The Hunter is a cool song. Again, not super heavy, kind of mid-paced. The Last Laugh is good. Depths of Hell is cool. There's just not a lot on here super fast or technical, but all these songs are really good. Vengeance Is Mine is a good heavy one with good pacing to it. And then it's kind of got this like 3-song suite to end it. It's called The Suffering, but it's got, what is it? Slave to the Dark, A Question of Heaven. What was the other track? But basically everything on here is good. Everything on here is catchy, and again, I was, for some reason, I was disappointed when it came out, but in looking back on it, there's nothing to be disappointed about on here. This is also the 2nd studio album to feature Matt Barlow. And so, in my opinion, he's on all the classics. Who do we have on this album? Yeah, Matt Barlow, John Schaefer. Randy Shaver was this was his last album. I always thought Shaver and Schaefer were a really good tandem. It was too bad he left after the 4th album. It says Keith Menzer was the bass player, but I'm pretty sure there was somebody else doing the bass in the studio on this one. Again, this is a good album. It's a little more mid-pace. Some of the songs are a little mellower or have some mellower sections compared to the previous. You know, up to this point, everything they did was pretty heavy, like pretty dark and, you know, pretty menacing up to this point. So this was the first time where they actually kind of showed maybe a somewhat of a lighter side for the sake of songwriting. But this is an excellent album too. So coming in at number 4, I've got their 4th album from '96. I have Dark Saga. Okay, here's a classic. Coming in at number 3, what is this? Their 5th album from 1998. I've got Something Wicked, This Way Comes. This is a really killer album. I think this is the longest album at this point. A lot of their albums were kind of long, and you know, everything was at least 44, 45, 46 minutes, and then one of their albums was over 50. Now this one's like over an hour. Matt Barlow, 3rd album with the band. He done some other stuff with them too up to this point. I'm trying to think who else was in the lineup, but they have just the ever-changing lineup of Brent Smedley's on drums now, but I think Mark Prater did the drums in the studio for it. Jamie McDonough's on bass. Just another great album. The productions are always, the one thing about Iced Earth and these great productions they get at Morrisound is that, you know, the death metal bands, the problem with all that extreme metal was it was sometimes hard to completely harness. So you were just lucky if it was audible enough to understand what was going on. But Iced Earth didn't have that problem because they weren't playing super brutal death metal. They were just playing really tight technical metal. And John Schaefer is probably, when I think of awesome metal rhythm players, he's got to be one of the best rhythm players ever. Just his sweep picking ability is just unbelievable. So everything on this, especially this recording and on all their recordings, it's just super crystal clear. You can hear everything that's going on. Burning Times comes out of the gate really well. Melancholy, Holy Martyr, Disciples of the Lie. Watching Over Me is more of a ballad. So it started with Dark Saga, but I think it also started because they got Matt Barlow in the band. They had a singer that could do different things. So it started a little bit on Dark Saga, but by here, you've got ballads mixed in with the heavier stuff. So Watching Over Me is a good one. But then right back to the high octane with Stand Alone. Consequences is a cool, like, acoustic, I don't want to call it a ballad, it's just kind of a moody acoustic one. My Own Savior, Reaping Stone, they've got an instrumental called 1776. More on themes related to the history of the United States in a little bit, but Blessed Are You is good, Prophecy, Birth of the Wicked. So basically, I think it starts with Blessed Are You, but I know Prophecy, it starts with Prophecy. Prophecy, Birth of the Wicked, and The Coming Curse. Those 3 songs begin this storyline, the Something Wicked storyline that I'll talk about later, that continues on 2 more albums and actually continues on 3 more albums after this, but the beginning of the Something Wicked storyline begins here with the final 3 songs. Now, my reissue actually has 3 bonus tracks. Shooting Star cover, Shooting Star, the cover Electric Funeral from Black Sabbath, and the cover The Ripper from Judas Priest. So that's pretty awesome. I just think this is a really well-rounded album. So if you like it heavy, if you like the best production to this point, if you like some of the more colorful like ballads or the moody stuff, and if you like the longest album they've put out to date, check this one out. It's just got a mix of everything. Just a solid. Oh, this is their sort of their mascot at this point. I think his name is Set Abomine, and I don't pretend to know the Something Wicked storyline, but I think he has a big part in it. So I think he pops up here. In the next Prepper Studio, the album they do is Horror Show. I don't know if he has anything to do with Horror Show, but because it's about horror movies, they kind of picture him there. And then he goes away for another album because it has nothing to do with with the Something Wicked storyline, but then he reappears, and I think he's been reappearing ever since. But so there you go. Coming in at number 3 from 98, I have Something Wicked, This Way Comes. Okay. Number 2, I mean, as if number 3 wasn't a classic, these top 2 are classics. And I wanted to rank this one number 1. I wanted to. It feels like a number 1. I think the songs tell you it's the number 1, but the vocals tell you it's not perfect. And if it's not perfect, how can it be their ultimate classic? So this is the only band I struggle with when it comes to this type of situation, where their best collection of songs are marred by not the best vocals. So at number 2, I have from 1991, I have Night of the Storm Rider. Again, this is the album I got into him on. Love that album cover. Angels, Holocaust into Storm Rider, The Path I Choose, Desert Rain, Pure Evil, Travel and Stygian. It's got a couple of shorter, like, acoustic ones with vocals. It's got Mystical End. I mean, this is a perfect album as far as songs, but they've got John Greeley on vocals, who's better than Gene Adam was on the first album. I'll give him that. He's okay. But there are versions of almost all of these songs with Matt Barlow singing it. So thankfully, an album this great has versions where you can just look at that awesome album cover, but then listen to the re-recorded vocal versions. But you gotta love that artwork. Axel Herman. What's hilarious is the reissue shows you the original artwork somebody sent in, and I think they were on a tight deadline, and they were almost like, we're going to be screwed. So Axel Herman had to draw something like in a day or 2. But look how bad that original artwork was that somebody drew for the album cover. Drew that, send it in, and they're like, oh dear Lord, we're going to have to... We better not cut corners on a budget on this. We better get Axel Herman back on here. So I think his is much better. Certainly iconic. I didn't know anything about Iced Earth. I just saw the album cover in the store. This is literally what got me into them, was this cassette right here. I knew nothing about them other than it was a 1991 release on Century Media. And I actually thought it was going to be death metal. So when I turned it on and heard, you know, the high vocals, I was quite surprised. However, it's my kind of album. The music's all adventurous, and it's heavy and adventurous and kind of technical, and lots of riffs and everything. So again, it's right up my alley. And again, I feel like it's the number 1 album. It's just that, you know, again, it just feels like the vocals maybe knocked it down just a peg. But this is a killer album. This is where I got on board, and like I said, probably their best collection of songs. It's another one that you just put it on. I think it's 9 songs, 46 minutes. And if you take out the 2 acoustic things, it's really 7 songs in about 42 minutes. So everything's really long on here. We heard Travel in Stygian. Might be my favorite track from them, although this one's pretty darn good. But we listened to the re-recorded version, re-recorded vocally by Matt Barlow. So at least, even though this is marred by less than stellar vocals, almost everything on here with the exception of 2 tracks is re-recorded. In one of those 2 tracks that wasn't re-recorded, you can find Barlow singing on a live thing, which I'll get to in a little bit. So there you go. Coming in at number 2, an absolute classic from 91, I've got Night of the Storm Rider. Okay. Coming in at number 1, Process of Elimination. From 1995, their first one with Matt Barlow, I've got Burnt Offerings. We're listening to Dante's Inferno right now. 16.5-minute song that somehow just keeps it totally energized the whole way through. There aren't too many songs this long that'll keep you entertained throughout, but this is definitely one of them. This is probably their best song. I mean, my favorite songs by the band are Travel in Stygian, which we heard, Dante's Inferno. They have a ton of awesome songs. I think the other ones would be like Angels, Holocaust, and The Storm Rider. But all of the classics seem to come from these two top 2 that I rank, or the first 3. But this is, I have no problem making this the number one because it's an absolute classic, and I loved it when it came out. And I just remember hearing this vocalist going, finally, this guy should just stick around and be the vocalist. You know, Burnt Offerings that started, you know, the title track. Last December is awesome. Diary's cool. Brainwash, Burning Oasis, Creator Failure, a short acoustic one called The Pierced Spirit, and then you get Dante's Inferno. So at this point, I think this was their longest album, 52 minutes or so. It's just absolute perfection. I think the reason this is number one and Night of the Storm Riders number two is just the vocal performances on the original version. And this one was as if Night of the Storm Rider wasn't so ambitious, which it totally was. This is even more ambitious. And that's why, you know, when I'm ranking Iced Earth here, I'm ranking the first six, the first early years, the first half of their discography, just because I think they were just, their trajectory was going up. They were so ambitious early on. They were just expanding the Iced Earth sound, you know, and I thought, and they did that throughout the entire 90s. I think, you know, I like Horror Show a lot, and I'm not saying they didn't expand the sound a little, but it just seemed like they did. If you never listened to anything but Iced Earth in the 90s, I think you'd still be pretty satisfied. But there you go. At number one from 1995, an absolute classic, Burnt Offerings. So real quick to re-rank here, I've got at number 6 from 01, I've got Horror Show. At number 5, their debut from 90, self-titled Iced Earth. At number 4 from 96, I've got Dark Saga. And at number 3 from 98, I've got Something Wicked This Way Comes. At number 2, we've got Night of the Storm Rider. And at number 1, I've got Burnt Offerings from 95. And I keep talking about these re-recordings. That's because this Days of Purgatory re-recorded stuff in 96. It came out in 97. They basically brought in Matt Barlow to re-record or do vocals over songs on the first 2 albums and the demo, Enter the Realm demo. So you've got just most of the self-titled debut and almost all of Night of the Storm Rider re-recorded with Matt Barlow. They even re-recorded the drums and bass lines, which I don't hear as much of a difference in those because I thought the original drumming and bass playing was perfectly fine. But whatever, it sounds fine. But the real key here is that they've got Matt Barlow doing vocals on just about, you know, Colors, Angels Holocaust, Storm Rider, Winter Nights, which is an early demo from '86. You'll only find on here. Nightmares, Before the Vision, Pure Evil, Solitude, The Funeral, When the Night Falls, Cast in Stone, Desert Rain, Life and Death, Reaching the End, Travel and Stygian, Iced Earth, the song. All of those songs I just named are all songs from the demo days and the first 2 albums. So most of this is basically just Barlow redoing those early songs with less than stellar vocals. So this is an awesome sort of greatest hits, and I think it's like essential. If we were really ranking the albums, this might be number 1. And you know what else would be number 1 or 2? Is this thing, Alive in Athens, recorded in 99, released in 99. It covers their first 5 albums. This is the band at their, literally at their peak. You've got Matt Barlow. I think Brent Smedley's on drums. Larry Tarnowski's the other guitar player. I don't even know who's on bass at this point. But they have, 28 songs on the DVD. You've got 32 songs on the CD. They cover more than half of every album. So of the 5 albums, they cover almost all of Dark Saga and Something Wicked This Way Comes, and they cover at least half of the first album, at least half of Night of the Storm Rider, and at least half of Burnt Offering, including this song. So if you don't know where to start, you can start with the 2 classics I mentioned, or you can just get these 2, because this covers everything up through the first 3 studio albums, and this covers mostly the 2 after. You know, Dark Saga and Something Wicked This Way Comes. It's still at least half of the early stuff, and then this covers almost all of the early stuff. So these 2 to me are like the most essential ones to get. This one came out in 97, this in 99. The DVD's awesome. I know John Schaefer is not a fan of the picture quality because there were limited cameras, but that's what I like. It doesn't give you a headache. It just kind of hones in on, okay, he's singing, so we'll just kind of frame on him. Okay, he's doing a solo, we'll frame on him. Okay, let's just pan back and we'll just get the whole band playing. I actually prefer a simple, less cameras. You don't get a headache on here, and you get all of the awesome songs on here. And one song that Barlow didn't re-record off Night of the Storm Rider in the studio was The Path I Choose, and it's one of my favorites, and it's on here. So, I mean, you basically hear Barlow covering everything you like on those first 2 albums in the demo that had different singers. You can find one way or another on these. So there you go. That is covering the classic era of Iced Earth. This is all I had. I didn't have any proper posters, so I've got all of this up. I think the next song is probably going to be something more modern with their current singer, Stu Block. I kind of just stopped following the band after '01. I think Horror Show I liked, but it just seemed like maybe my tastes were changing at the time, or, you know, I just felt like Iced Earth was kind of a awesome band in the 90s. But I will say that, you know, they got Tim Ripper Owens, and they came out with this album called The Glorious Burden in '04, and I was a little taken aback when I saw it. I think musically it sounded similar to Iced Earth, but they weren't pushing anything forward musically at this point. And Tim Ripper Owens is just this, like, you know, he was in Judas Priest. I mean, he sounds like Halford completely. And the subject matter was, you know, was like the Civil War. I mean, the last 3 songs, it's what, Valley Forge, Waterloo, and then the Gettysburg 1863 suite. And it's, I think I like it more. I think at the time it came out, it opened with the Star Spangled Banner, and it just, I was just kind of like taken aback. And the album cover, by the way, the album cover is awesome, but it's just not one of these fantasy mythology type album covers that they always have. So it was a unique album with a different singer, and I remember being bummed that Matt Barlow was gone. That's, I think, what was driving me to step away from the band, which is too bad because Ripper is an excellent vocalist. And when I listen to it now, it's all right. I mean, that album is, some people love that album. It just, I don't find not too much that's memorable with it. And the only thing that pushes the sound forward for Iced Earth on that is not the sound, it's just the lyrical content. Stu Block, their new singer, is great. He sounds like Matt Barlow. And he also can do the Ripper Owens high stuff, so he can do it all. And he came from a band called Into Eternity where he had to do the death vocal too. So I do like Stu Block. I think Iced Earth doesn't have a bad album, but the ones after The Glorious Burden, they did Something Wicked Part 1, Framing Armageddon, and Something Wicked Part 2, The Crucible of Man. Great album cover, but those 2 albums are... They took that Something Wicked This Way Comes, that little 3-song storyline, and they just expanded it over 2 albums of like a bunch of 1 and 2 minute tracks. And the storyline drove the albums, and they don't resonate with me. I don't know what's going on in the storyline, and you're hungry for chunks of good music throughout, and it's just all these like starts and stops. And I was already kind of like on the fence because they lost Matt Barlow and did this whole album on the Civil War, and then they do this whole storyline over 2 albums that just has me lost. I will say Stu Block gets in the band and they released Dystopia, which we're listening to Anthem right now. And that's probably my favorite thing that they've done since since those early days, since the Century Media, the first run. Dystopia is great. I think Plagues of Babylon's pretty good as well. And that continues the Something Wicked storyline for the first half of that album. And track 6 says the end with a question mark, like he may not even be done with the storyline. And then their most recent album, and third with Stu, is called Incorruptible from 2017. So I reviewed the first 6. They've got another 6 albums after that. The first 2 in a row are with Ripper Owens. Matt Barlow comes back for Crucible of Man because I guess Schaefer didn't feel like Ripper was into it on that Something Wicked Part 1, so he brings in Matt Barlow for Something Wicked Part 2, but I guess he didn't feel Barlow was into that one, so they went through 2 vocalists for good and brought in Stu Block and started a whole new thing. But, you know, in fairness, it was probably tough to get into the concept in those songs of the 2 Something Wicked albums, but I guess if I had to rank quickly, my first 6 are the first 6 that I ranked, and then Dystopia would be 7. I guess Plagues of Babylon would be 8. Incorruptible would be 9. So the next 3 was Stu Block. I guess The Glorious Burden's all right. I'd put that at 10, and then at 11 and 12, you can flip a coin as to which one's better than the other. I guess I would go with The Crucible of Man at 11 and Framing Armageddon at 12, something like that. But I think you know, the stuff that they've done since I did these rankings is fine. I just think that this was the heyday. These were the glory years. So that's what I chose to review, what I think are their best albums and the ones I know. And I thought there was enough here to review. So, one other thing. You know I like them. They're on my coffee thermos. I found a place for the logo there. So there you have it. That is ranking the albums of the classic era of Iced Earth. So what would that be? 90 to 01, something like that. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.